Some things are better off burned than forgiven.
The first thing you need to know about suburbia is that everyone's watching, but nobody's really seeing. Take my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, for instance. She can tell you exactly what time I leave for work every morning. 7:15, like clockwork. But she couldn't tell you that my wife Vanessa has been sneaking out at midnight 3 times a week for the past 2 months. My name is Mason Cole, and I'm a civil engineer. That means I build things that don't fall down, which is more than I can say for my marriage. At 38, I thought I had life figured out. Nice house in North Dallas, decent salary, wife who looked good at company parties. The American dream wrapped in a mortgage and tied with a bow made of carefully maintained lawn. But dreams have a way of turning into nightmares when you're not paying attention. It started with the phone calls. Vanessa would step outside to take them, her voice dropping to that breathy whisper she used to save for me. Then came the new workout routine. Suddenly, my wife, who couldn't be bothered to walk to the mailbox, was hitting the gym twice a day. "It's for my health, Mason," Listen, she'd say, adjusting her new sports bra, the expensive kind that cost more than my work boots. "You should try it sometime." I should have known something was wrong when she started wearing perfume to bed. Not the subtle stuff either, but something that smelled like it came with its own spotlight and backup dancers. The revelation came on a Tuesday. I'd forgotten my blueprints and came home early to find Vanessa's car in the driveway and another car I didn't recognize. A custom Mustang with racing stripes and the kind of exhaust system that screamed, compensating for something. I didn't burst through the front door like some cliched husband in a soap opera. Instead, I did what any good engineer would do. I gathered data. I walked around to the back of the house and looked through the kitchen window. There was my wife of 8 years pressed against our granite countertop with a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, muscular in that artificial gym rat way, with the kind of tan that came from a bottle. His hands were all over her, and she was making sounds I hadn't heard in years. I stood there for exactly 30 seconds, watching my marriage dissolve in real time. Then I walked back to my car and drove to the office. I had work to do. That evening, Vanessa greeted me with a kiss that tasted like guilt and too much mouthwash. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, her smile bright enough to power the neighborhood. "Educational," I replied, hanging up my jacket. "Yours?" "Oh, boring. I spent most of the day cleaning the house." I nodded, noting the way she avoided eye contact. "Must have worked up quite a sweat. You might want to check the kitchen counter. Looks like you missed a spot." She froze for just a moment, long enough for me to catalog the flash of panic in her eyes, then laughed it off. "You know me, always missing the details." "Not all of them," I said quietly. That night, I lay in bed next to my cheating wife and planned my next move. I'm an engineer, which means I believe in structural integrity. When something's compromised, you don't patch it up with duct tape and hope for the best. You tear it down and start over. But first, you make sure everyone knows why it had to come down. Over the next week, I conducted my investigation with the thoroughness of a building inspector. I learned that Vanessa's mystery man was Trent Cross, owner of Elite Fitness Club downtown. I learned that their affair had been going on for 3 months. I learned that Vanessa had been telling her friends she was planning to leave me once the timing was right. The timing became right on a Friday evening when I intercepted a text message on Vanessa's phone while she was in the shower. It was from her friend Blair. "Just remember, girl, you can always say yes to Mason for now, but we all know you'll dump him eventually. Trent's worth the wait." Vanessa's response made my whole body run cold. Already planning my exit strategy. Mason's too boring to keep around much longer. A few more months and I'll be free. I screenshot the conversation and forwarded it to myself. Then I did something that surprised even me. I forwarded it to Vanessa's parents. Richard and Diane Morrison had never particularly liked me. I wasn't wealthy enough, connected enough, or impressive enough for their precious daughter. But they valued family reputation above all else, and adultery didn't fit their image of suburban perfection. My phone rang within minutes. "Mason?" Richard's voice was strained. "We need to talk, now." I found them in their pristine living room, Vanessa's mother clutching the phone with the incriminating messages, her father pacing like a caged animal. "Is this real?" Diane whispered. "Unfortunately, yes. There's more where that came from." Richard stopped pacing. "What do you want?" "Nothing from you. I just thought you should know what kind of daughter you raised." Now see here. Richard started, but I cut him off. No, you see here. I've been nothing but loyal to Vanessa for 8 years. I've put up with her shopping sprees, her mood swings, and her complete lack of interest in anything that didn't revolve around her. But I won't be made a fool of. I stood up, straightening my jacket. I'm filing for divorce Monday morning. Vanessa can explain the details herself. As I reached the door, I heard Richard gasp. I turned to see him clutching his chest, his face gone pale. "Richard!" Diane screamed. I called emergency while Diane tried to help her husband to the couch. The paramedics arrived within minutes, and Richard was rushed to the hospital. Not a heart attack, thankfully, but severe chest pains brought on by stress. By the time Vanessa arrived at the hospital, the whole ugly truth was out. She took one look at her mother's tear-stained face and her father's pale complexion, then turned to me with fury in her eyes. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You nearly ended him." "No," I replied calmly. "Your choices nearly ended him. I just delivered the news." The next morning, I did something that felt both petty and deeply satisfying. I gathered every piece of expensive lingerie Vanessa had bought in the past 3 months, the stuff she'd been wearing for Trent instead of me, and carried it out to our backyard fire pit. The flames turned the silk and lace into ash and smoke, releasing 3 months of lies into the Dallas morning air. I collected the ashes in a decorative gift box we'd received for our wedding. Seemed appropriate somehow. Mrs. Patterson watched from her kitchen window, probably wondering if I'd finally snapped. I gave her a cheerful wave and headed inside to shower. Vanessa came home from the hospital around noon, her eyes red from crying. She found me in the kitchen, calmly eating a sandwich. "We need to talk," she said. "Dewey, I thought you'd covered everything in your text messages." She had the decency to look ashamed. "You weren't supposed to see those." "I wasn't supposed to see you with Trent either, but life's full of surprises." "Mason, please, it's not what you think." I set down my sandwich and looked at her, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, still the woman who'd caught my eye at a company barbecue 9 years ago. But now I could see the calculation behind her smile, the way she tilted her head just so when she wanted something. "It's exactly what I think, Vanessa. You're bored with me, you found someone more exciting, and you were planning to string me along until you figured out your exit strategy. That's not, I was confused." "Save it." I stood up and walked to the counter, picking up the gift box of ashes. "I have something for your father, a get-well present." Her eyes widened when she saw the box. "What is that?" "The remains of your relationship with Trent. Figured your dad might appreciate the symbolism." I drove to the hospital with the box on my passenger seat, ignoring Vanessa's frantic phone calls. Richard was awake when I arrived, looking older than his 62 years. "Mason," he said weakly, "I owe you an apology." "No, you don't. You were protecting your daughter. I respect that." I set the gift box on his bedside table. "This is for you. A reminder that some things are better off burned." He opened the box and stared at the ashes for a long moment. "What am I looking at?" "The lingerie she bought for him. Seemed like a waste to let it sit in the closet." Richard's face went through several emotions before settling on grim satisfaction. "You're a better man than I gave you credit for, Mason. I'm just a man who's tired of being played for a fool." Diane arrived as I was leaving. She took one look at her husband's face and the box of ashes, then nodded at me with something approaching respect. "She's at home crying," she said quietly. "Good. Maybe she's finally understanding the consequences of her choices." But consequences in suburbia don't stay private for long. By evening, the whole neighborhood was buzzing with rumors. Vanessa's friends, Blair, Cassie, and Jules, had apparently been busy spreading their version of events. According to them, I was the villain. I was controlling, suspicious, and had caused Richard's hospitalization through my cruel behavior. They painted Vanessa as the victim of an oppressive marriage, finally finding happiness with a man who appreciated her. The narrative might have stuck if I hadn't prepared for it. I'd spent years listening to Vanessa's phone calls with her friends, cataloging their own marital problems and indiscretions. Blair was having an emotional affair with her personal trainer. Cassie was hiding shopping debts from her husband. Jules had been lying about her son's grades to get him into private school. I had dirt on all of them, carefully documented and verified. If they wanted to play the gossip game, I was ready to play it better. The first move was fired at the neighborhood coffee shop on Sunday morning. I was buying my usual dark roast when Blair approached me with her fake concerned expression. "Mason, honey, we're all so worried about you. This whole situation with Vanessa, you mean her affair with Trent Cross?" Blair's smile faltered. Well, that's such an ugly word. It's an ugly situation, but not as ugly as married women encouraging their friends to cheat while they're sending intimate messages to their own personal trainers. The coffee shop went dead quiet. Blair's face turned the color of her expensive highlights. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Sure you do. His name's Derek, right? The one with the tribal tattoos? Vanessa showed me the screenshots months ago. Thought it was hilarious. I paid for my coffee and headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Blair? You might want to be more careful about where you park when you meet him. Mrs. Henderson has been taking pictures. The beauty of suburban warfare is that everyone has secrets and everyone talks. By Monday morning, the narrative had shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the controlling husband. I was the wronged party who'd been betrayed by his wife and her toxic friends. Vanessa tried calling me at work, but I let it go to voicemail. Her message was a rambling mix of apologies and accusations, ending with a threat to make me pay for humiliating her friends. I saved the voicemail. Evidence is evidence, and I had a feeling I'd need all I could get. That evening, I came home to find the locks changed and my belongings scattered across the front lawn. Vanessa stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, flanked by Trent Cross himself. He was exactly what I'd expected, all muscle and swagger, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to think too hard about anything. He looked me up and down like I was something he might scrape off his shoe. You must be the husband, he said, his voice carrying just a hint of a smirk. And you must be the mistake, I replied evenly. His face darkened, but before he could respond, Vanessa stepped forward. You can't come in, Mason. This is my house too, and I don't feel safe with you here. Your house? I laughed, pulling out my phone. Funny thing about property records, they're public. This house is in my name, bought with my credit, paid for with my salary. You're a resident, not an owner. I speed dialed my lawyer, putting the call on speaker. Tom, it's Mason Cole. I'm standing in front of my house and someone's changed the locks illegally. Can you conference in the police? Vanessa's confidence evaporated as she realized her mistake. In Texas, you can't just lock out a property owner, even in a marriage dispute. 20 minutes later, a squad car pulled up, followed by a locksmith I'd called. The officer was polite but firm. Vanessa had no legal right to change the locks without a court order. As the locksmith worked, I gathered my scattered belongings with deliberate calm. Trent hovered nearby, clearly wanting to start something, but smart enough to know that assaulting someone in front of a cop was a bad idea. This isn't over, he muttered as I carried a box past him. You're absolutely right, I agreed. It's just getting started. I moved into a furnished apartment across town, a temporary base of operations while I planned my next moves. My friend Theo helped me carry in the boxes, his deadpan commentary providing welcome relief from the drama. So let me get this straight, he said, setting down a box of books. Your wife cheats on you with a meathead gym owner, tries to steal your house, and now you're living in a place that smells like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. That about sums it up. Theo was my opposite in most ways. Where I was methodical, he was impulsive. Where I was diplomatic, he was brutally honest. But we'd been friends since college, and he had skills I needed. Specifically, he was an IT specialist with a flexible relationship with privacy laws. What's the plan? He asked, cracking open a beer from my mini fridge. Information gathering. I need to know everything about Trent Cross and his relationship with Vanessa. Finances, timeline, who else knows about it? Legal information gathering, I hope. Completely legal. Public records, social media, maybe some old-fashioned surveillance. Theo grinned. Now you're talking my language. We started with the basics. Trent's gym was heavily mortgaged, with several liens against the property. His personal finances were a mess. Multiple credit cards maxed out, 2 car loans, and a history of bounced checks. The man was living paycheck to paycheck despite his flashy lifestyle. Classic case of fake it till you make it, Theo observed, scrolling through public records on his laptop. Except he never made it. The social media investigation was more revealing. Trent's Instagram was full of shirtless selfies and motivational quotes, but the metadata told a different story. Many of his gym photos were taken at other locations, suggesting he was spending less time at his business than he claimed. More interesting were the photos that included other women. Trent had a type, married, well-dressed, probably wealthy. Vanessa wasn't his first affair. She was just his latest. Look at this, Theo said, pointing to a photo from 2 months ago. Same restaurant where you saw him with Vanessa, but he's with a different woman, wedding ring clearly visible. I studied the image. The woman looked familiar, but I couldn't place her immediately. Can you enhance this? Get a better look at her face? Already on it. Theo's fingers flew across the keyboard. Got it. Meet Jennifer Walsh, wife of prominent Dallas attorney Michael Walsh. She filed for divorce 3 weeks ago. The pattern was becoming clear. Trent wasn't just cheating with married women. He was targeting wives of successful men, probably looking for financial opportunities or divorce settlements he could benefit from. We need to talk to Jennifer Walsh, I said. Already found her new address. Divorced women love to talk about their cheating exes, especially when they find out they weren't the only ones. Jennifer Walsh lived in a high-rise, downtown, the kind of place you move to when you want to start over with a view. She agreed to meet me after I explained the situation, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. That bastard, she said when I showed her the photos of Trent with Vanessa. We were sitting in her pristine living room, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the Dallas skyline. He told me I was special, that he'd never felt this way about anyone. How did you meet him? At the gym, of course. I joined after my husband and I started having problems. Trent was so attentive, so understanding. He made me feel attractive again. What happened? Jennifer's laugh was bitter. I left my husband for him, filed for divorce, gave up half my assets, destroyed a 20-year marriage. 2 weeks later, I caught him with another woman. When I confronted him, he said I was too clingy and that he needed space. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. What are you planning to do about him? I'm going to expose him, show everyone what he really is. Count me in. I have photos, text messages, financial records showing money I loaned him that he never paid back. Whatever you need. Armed with Jennifer's evidence and Theo's research, I started building my case. But I needed more than just documentation. I needed to catch Trent in the act of being himself. The opportunity came the following Friday. Theo had hacked into the gym's public Wi-Fi, completely legal, he assured me, since it was unsecured, and discovered that Trent was meeting with potential investors that evening. Apparently, he was trying to expand his business, looking for partners to help him open a second location. This should be interesting, Theo said as we parked across from the upscale steakhouse where the meeting was taking place. Guy can barely keep one gym afloat, and he wants to open another. Through the restaurant's windows, we could see Trent holding a court at a corner table, gesturing expansively to 3 men in expensive suits. Even from a distance, his body language screamed desperation disguised as confidence. What do you think he's telling them? I asked. Probably that he's a successful businessman with a proven track record, maybe throwing around some inflated membership numbers. We didn't have to wait long to find out. One of the investors, a heavy-set man with silver hair, stood up abruptly and walked out, shaking his head. The other 2 followed within minutes, leaving Trent alone at the table with the check. That didn't go well, Theo observed. Trent sat there for another 10 minutes, presumably trying to figure out how to pay for dinner he couldn't afford. Finally, he pulled out his phone and made a call. I couldn't hear the conversation, but his body language suggested he was begging. Want to bet he's calling Vanessa for money? I asked. No bet. Look. Trent was walking toward the exit, but instead of heading to the parking lot, he went around to the back of the restaurant. We followed at a distance and watched as he met with a younger man near the dumpsters. The exchange was brief but telling. The young man handed Trent an envelope, and Trent handed over what looked like a small package. It wasn't pills, the package was too small, and the handoff too casual, but it was definitely something he didn't want to do in public. Steroids, Theo said quietly. Has to be, guy that size doesn't maintain that muscle mass naturally, and he's probably selling to his gym clients. Can you get photos? Already did. High resolution, perfect lighting from the security light. This is going to look great blown up to poster size. We followed Trent back to his car, a custom Mustang that probably cost more than my annual salary. As he drove away, I noticed something that made me smile. Did you see his license plate? Alpha 1, subtle? No, the registration sticker. It expired 2 months ago. Theo grinned. Want me to call it in? Not yet. I have a better idea. The next phase of my plan required patience and timing. I needed Trent to feel secure, to think he was winning. Only then would he make the kind of mistake I could exploit. But first, I had a confrontation to arrange. It was time to have a face-to-face conversation with my wife's boyfriend, and I wanted it to be somewhere public, somewhere he couldn't intimidate me or control the narrative. The opportunity came 3 days later when Vanessa posted on social media about a romantic dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. The photo showed her hand reaching across a table towards someone just out of frame, but the location tag made it clear where they were. I put on my best suit and made a reservation. The restaurant was the kind of place where they brought you 7 different forks and expected you to know which one to use for the fish course. I arrived early and requested a table with a clear view of the dining room, telling the hostess I was waiting for business associates. Trent and Vanessa walked in 20 minutes later, his hand possessively on her lower back as they followed the maitre d' to their table. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, probably bought with money from our joint account. They were seated 3 tables away, close enough for me to observe but far enough to avoid immediate detection. I ordered wine and settled in to watch the show. Their body language told the whole story. Vanessa was animated, leaning forward, touching his arm when she laughed. Trent was distracted, checking his phone repeatedly, his responses perfunctory. He looked like a man going through the motions. I waited until they'd ordered their main courses, then walked over to their table. Vanessa, Trent. I nodded politely, as if encountering old friends. What a pleasant surprise! Vanessa's face went white. Trent half rose from his chair, his jaw tight. What the heck are you doing here? He demanded. Having dinner, same as you. I smiled at Vanessa. That's a lovely dress. New? Mason, please don't make a scene, she whispered. A scene? I'm just saying hello to my wife and her friend. I turned to Trent. How's business, Trent? I heard your investor meeting didn't go well the other night. His face darkened. You've been following me? Following you? No, but this is a small town and people talk. Especially when someone's trying to expand a failing business with other people's money. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Elite fitness club, 3 liens against the property, 2 months behind on the lease payment. That's public record, by the way. Trent stood up fully now, his hands clenched into fists. Several other diners were starting to stare. You need to leave, now. Actually, I think I'll stay. I made a reservation. I looked around the dining room, noting the attention we were attracting. Besides, I wouldn't want to miss your explanation to Vanessa about why you can't afford to pay for dinner. I can pay for dinner, he snarled. Can you? Because I saw you begging for money in the parking lot behind Brennan's last Friday. Right after your investors walked out. Vanessa looked confused. What investors? Trent shot me a look of pure hatred. It's none of your business. Maybe not, but it's definitely Vanessa's business, since she's been loaning you money from our joint account. $1,200 last week, if I'm reading the bank statements correctly. The color drained from Vanessa's face. You said that was for new gym equipment. It was, for my home gym. The business is fine. I pulled out my phone and showed them both the photos Theo had taken of Trent's clandestine meeting behind the restaurant. Interesting equipment, very pharmaceutical. Trent lunged for the phone, but I was ready for him. I stepped back smoothly, letting him stumble forward into an empty chair. Careful there, big guy. Wouldn't want to cause a scene. The restaurant manager appeared at our table, his expression professionally concerned but firm. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to keep your voices down, or I'll have to ask you to leave. Of course, I said pleasantly. I was just congratulating the happy couple on their relationship. Though I should mention that Mr. Cross might want to settle his tab quickly. I understand his credit cards have been declined here before. Trent's face went purple. You son of a... Trent! Vanessa grabbed his arm. Stop it. People are staring. I straightened my jacket and smiled at them both. Well, I should get back to my table. My dinner's getting cold. Enjoy your evening. As I walked away, I could hear them arguing in harsh whispers. Vanessa was demanding explanations, and Trent was deflecting with increasing desperation. I finished my meal in peace, watching their relationship implode in real time. By the time I paid my check, they were gone, leaving behind a table full of untouched food and what looked like a very frustrated waiter. The next morning, I put the second phase of my plan into motion. Trent's custom Mustang was his pride and joy, a symbol of the success he pretended to have. He parked it in the same spot every day, a handicapped space behind his gym, probably figuring no one would ticket him on his own property. He was wrong about that, but the parking violation was the least of his problems. I arrived at 5 a.m. with a bag of supplies I'd purchased at various stores around town. Nothing illegal, nothing that would cause permanent damage, but everything designed to create maximum embarrassment and inconvenience. First, I stuffed raw shrimp deep into his exhaust pipes. The smell wouldn't be noticeable immediately, but after a few hours in the Texas heat, his car would become a mobile stink bomb. Next, I poured a bag of sugar into his gas tank. Contrary to popular belief, sugar doesn't actually destroy an engine, but it does create a sticky mess that requires expensive cleaning. Finally, I used washable paint to write "small engine syndrome" across his windshield, along with the gym's phone number, and the suggestion that people call to discuss Trent's performance issues. The piece de resistance was a video I recorded of the whole process, carefully edited to show Trent's license plate and the gym's logo while hiding my own identity. I posted the video on the gym's social media accounts. Theo had helpfully provided the login credentials after discovering that Trent used the same password for everything, Alpha1223. The video went viral within hours, shared by everyone who'd ever been annoyed by Trent's arrogance or his illegal parking. The gym's phone rang constantly with people wanting to know if the small engine classes were real and whether Trent offered personal consultations. But the real fireworks started that evening, when Vanessa's friends decided to stage an intervention. I was at my apartment, enjoying a beer and reading the increasingly frantic comments on the gym's social media pages, when someone pounded on my door. I opened it to find Blair, Cassie, and Jules standing in the hallway, their faces flushed with righteous indignation. "We need to talk," Blair announced, pushing past me into the apartment. "Good evening, ladies. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "You know exactly why we're here," Cassie snapped. "This has gone too far." "Has it? I'm not sure what you're referring to." Jules pulled out her phone and showed me the video of Trent's car. "This is harassment. It's illegal." "Is it? I didn't see anyone's face in that video. Could have been anyone." "It was you," Blair said. "We know it was you. Prove it." They couldn't, of course, because I'd been careful. But their frustration was palpable, and I could see them struggling with the desire to threaten me and the knowledge that they had no leverage. "Vanessa is devastated," Cassie said, changing tactics. "She loves you, Mason. She made a mistake, but she wants to work things out." Funny way of showing it. Last I checked, she was still living in my house with her boyfriend. That's temporary. She's confused. No, she's not. She's calculating. The only reason she wants to work things out is because she's realizing that Trent can't provide the lifestyle she wants. Blair stepped forward, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a threatening whisper. "You need to stop this vendetta, Mason. People are starting to talk. Let them talk. I've got nothing to hide. Don't you?" Jules smiled coldly. "Because we've been doing some digging of our own. Did you know that vandalizing someone's car is a felony in Texas? Good thing I didn't vandalize anyone's car. We have witnesses who saw you near the gym that morning. Do you? I'd love to meet them." The truth was they didn't have witnesses because I'd been careful to avoid the security cameras and arrive before anyone else was around. But they were desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. "We're recording this conversation," Blair announced, holding up her phone. "Great. Then you'll have evidence of you three breaking into my apartment and making false accusations." "We didn't break in. You pushed past me without permission. That's trespassing. And since you're recording without my consent, that's illegal too." Their confidence evaporated as they realized they'd overplayed their hand. "This isn't over," Blair said as they headed for the door. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "But you might want to be more careful about your next move. I'd hate for your husbands to find out about your little conspiracy." After they left, I poured another beer and called Theo. "How'd it go, he asked. "Better than expected. They're panicking, which means they're going to make more mistakes." "What's next?" "Time for the nuclear option. I'm done playing defense." "About time. What do you need?" "Remember that evidence Jennifer Walsh gave us? I think it's time to share it with a wider audience." The beauty of social media is that truth travels just as fast as lies, and sometimes faster. I'd been patient, methodical, building my case piece by piece. But Vanessa's friends had forced my hand with their amateur intimidation tactics. It was time to go public. I started with Facebook, creating a post that was carefully worded to avoid any legal issues while maximizing embarrassment for everyone involved. It's been an interesting few months, I wrote. I've learned a lot about friendship, loyalty, and the importance of choosing your associates carefully. For instance, did you know that some fitness instructors supplement their income by selling pharmaceutical enhancements to their clients? Or that some marriage counselors think the best way to fix a relationship is to encourage infidelity? I attached the photos Theo had taken of Trent's parking lot transaction, along with screenshots of the text messages Jennifer Walsh had provided showing Trent asking her for money to invest in their future together. The post exploded within hours. Comments poured in from neighbors, co-workers, and casual acquaintances, all expressing shock and support. But more importantly, other women started coming forward with their own stories about Trent. Sarah Martinez, whose husband owned a chain of auto repair shops, admitted that Trent had pursued her aggressively before she shut him down. Lisa Chen, a real estate agent, revealed that Trent had asked her for investment advice while trying to get her alone at the gym. A pattern emerged of a man who targeted successful married women, not for love or even lust, but for financial opportunity. He was a predator in designer workout clothes. Vanessa tried to control the damage, posting her own response that painted me as a bitter ex-husband who couldn't accept that she'd found happiness. But her credibility was shot, and the comments on her post were brutal. "Happiness with a steroid dealer?" wrote one of her former friends. "How much money did you loan him?" asked another. "Girl, you traded a good man for a con artist. That's not happiness, that's stupidity." The coup de grace came when Jennifer Walsh decided to share her own story publicly, posting a detailed account of her relationship with Trent, complete with financial records showing the money she'd lost and the lies he'd told. "Mason Cole is a good man who deserves better," she wrote. "I wish someone had warned me about Trent Cross before I destroyed my marriage for him. Don't make my mistake." By the end of the week, Trent's gym was hemorrhaging members, and Vanessa was facing uncomfortable questions from everyone she knew. But they weren't finished fighting. The counterattack came on a Saturday morning when I was having coffee with Theo, planning our next move. My phone rang and I recognized the number as belonging to Vanessa's cousin Mark, a lawyer who specialized in intimidating people with more bluster than legal knowledge. "Mason, this is Mark Morrison. We need to talk." "Hello, Mark. How's the family law practice?" "This isn't a social call. You need to stop this harassment campaign against my cousin and her friend, or we're going to take legal action." "What harassment campaign?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The social media posts, the vandalism, the stalking." "I haven't harassed anyone, Mark. I've shared factual information about public figures who inserted themselves into my life. That's protected speech." "Bees, you've been following them, taking pictures, posting lies." "Prove their lies, I'll wait." There was a long pause. Mark was smart enough to know that truth was an absolute defense against defamation claims, but arrogant enough to think he could intimidate me anyway. "I'm filing for a restraining order," he said finally. "On what grounds?" "Harassment, stalking, threatening behavior. You'll need evidence for that. Witnesses, documentation, proof of actual threats." "Do you have any of that?" Another pause. "I have witnesses who saw you at the restaurant confronting them." "You mean the public restaurant where I had dinner and said hello to my wife?" "That's not stalking, Mark. That's being polite." "What about the car vandalism?" "What about it? Do you have evidence that I was involved? Video footage, fingerprints, anything besides speculation?" "I have—" He stopped, realizing he was about to admit they had nothing. "Here's what you have, Mark. You have a client who cheated on her husband with a con artist, and now she's embarrassed that everyone knows about it. That's not a legal problem. That's a personal problem. This conversation is being recorded. Good. Then you'll have evidence that I've been completely reasonable and haven't made any threats or admitted to any wrongdoing. That should be helpful when you try to explain to a judge why you're wasting the court's time." I hung up and turned to Theo, who'd been listening with amusement. "Think he'll actually file for a restraining order? Maybe, but it won't go anywhere. I haven't done anything illegal, and they can't prove otherwise. What's next? Now we wait. They're going to make one last desperate play, and when they do, we'll be ready." The desperate play came sooner than expected. That evening, I received a text from Vanessa. "Can we meet? I want to talk. Just the two of us." I stared at the message for a long time, considering my options. Meeting with her was risky. She might try to record the conversation or set up some kind of confrontation with Trent, but I was curious about what she had to say. "Neutral location," I texted back. "Coffee shop on Main Street, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Thank you. Oh, I'll be there. I arrived early and chose a table near the window, with clear sightlines to all entrances. Vanessa walked in exactly on time, looking smaller somehow, less confident than I'd ever seen her. She'd dressed carefully, jeans and a simple blouse, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. It was the look she used to wear when we were dating, when she was trying to appear approachable and genuine. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "What do you want, Vanessa?" "I want to apologize. For everything. The affair, the lies, the way I treated you." "Okay. Apology noted." She looked hurt by my flat response. "Is that it? Don't you want to know why?" "I know why. You were bored, he was exciting, and you thought you could have both until you figured out which one could give you a better life. That's not—" She stopped, her shoulders sagging. "Okay, maybe that's part of it, but it's more complicated than that." "It really isn't. I made a mistake, Mason. A huge mistake. Trent isn't who I thought he was. No kidding. He's been using me. For money, for connections, for credibility. I was just another mark. And you're telling me this because—" She leaned forward, her eyes bright with tears that might have been genuine. "Because I want to come home. I want us to try again." I studied her face, looking for any sign of sincerity. What I saw was calculation, desperation, and the dawning realization that she'd bet on the wrong horse. "What about Trent?" "It's over. I ended it yesterday." "Did you? Or did he end it when he realized you couldn't help his career anymore?" Her silence was answer enough. "Here's the thing, Vanessa. Even if I believed you were sorry, which I don't, it wouldn't matter. You didn't just cheat on me. You humiliated me, stole from me, and tried to turn our friends against me. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. A series of choices. People can change. Can they? Because last week your friends were threatening me, and your cousin was talking about restraining orders. That doesn't sound like someone who's sorry." She was crying now, mascara running despite her minimal makeup. "What do you want from me? What can I do to fix this?" "Nothing. There's nothing you can do, because I don't want to fix it. I want it to stay broken." I stood up and dropped a $5 bill on the table for my coffee. "Good luck with whatever comes next, Vanessa, but it won't be with me." As I walked away, I could hear her sobbing behind me. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. But I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Desperate people do desperate things, and Vanessa was nothing if not desperate. The final confrontation was coming, and I wanted to be ready for it. The annual Meadowbrook Estates block party was scheduled for the last Saturday in October, a tradition that brought together all the neighborhood families for an evening of forced socialization and competitive casserole displays. Under normal circumstances, I would have avoided it entirely. But these weren't normal circumstances. Theo had intercepted communications between Vanessa and her remaining allies. Apparently, they were planning something they called Operation Vindication, which sounded like the kind of dramatic nonsense that suburban housewives thought was clever. "They're planning to ambush you at the block party," Theo explained, showing me the screenshots he'd captured from Blair's phone. "Public confrontation, probably recorded, designed to make you look unstable." "What kind of confrontation?" "Looks like they're going to accuse you of stalking and harassment in front of everyone. Then try to get you to lose your temper. Classic setup." I studied the messages, noting the careful planning and coordination. They'd even recruited some of the other neighbors, people who didn't know the full story but were willing to believe that I was the villain in this domestic drama. "They're underestimating me," I said finally. "Are you sure about that? Because this could get ugly fast." "It's going to get ugly regardless, but I'd rather control the narrative than react to theirs." The block party was held in the community park at the center of our subdivision, with folding tables arranged in a rough square around a small stage that was usually used for announcing HOA violations and reminding people to pick up after their dogs. I arrived fashionably late, carrying a store-bought potato salad and wearing my most innocent expression. The party was in full swing, with kids running around the playground while their parents clustered in small groups, gossiping and drinking wine from plastic cups. Vanessa was there with Trent, both of them working the crowd like politicians at a fundraiser. She'd dressed to impress, a sundress that showed off her figure, her hair perfectly styled, her smile bright and brittle. Trent looked uncomfortable in khakis and a polo shirt, clearly out of his element, in suburbia. I made my rounds, greeting neighbors with friendly small talk and carefully avoiding any mention of recent events. But I could feel the tension building, could see Vanessa and her allies positioning themselves for whatever they had planned. The ambush came during the dessert course, when the crowd was relaxed and slightly drunk on cheap wine and neighborhood gossip. Blair stood up and tapped her plastic fork against her wine glass, calling for attention. "Excuse me, everyone. I have something I'd like to say." The conversations died down as people turned to look at her. I stayed where I was, leaning against a picnic table with my arms crossed, waiting to see how this would play out. "We have a problem in our community," Blair began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who'd rehearsed this speech. "One of our neighbors has been engaging in harassment and stalking behavior that makes all of us feel unsafe." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People were looking around, trying to figure out who she was talking about. "Mason Cole has been following people, taking pictures, vandalizing property, and making threats," Blair continued, pointing directly at me. "He's been stalking his ex-wife and her boyfriend, posting lies about them on social media, and generally terrorizing anyone who doesn't support his vendetta." All eyes turned to me. I could see the uncertainty in their faces. Some people knew me well enough to doubt Blair's accusations, but others were ready to believe the worst. "That's a serious accusation," I said calmly. "Do you have any evidence to support it?" "We have plenty of evidence," Cassie chimed in, standing up with her phone in her hand. "We have witnesses, we have documentation, we have proof of your harassment campaign. Show it." "We don't have to prove anything to you," Jules added. "We're warning the neighborhood about your behavior." I looked around at the crowd, seeing the mix of curiosity and concern on their faces. This was the moment they'd been building toward, the public accusation designed to destroy my reputation and isolate me from the community. But they'd made a critical error. They'd assumed I would react defensively, that I would deny their accusations and try to argue my innocence. Instead, I pulled out my own phone and connected it to the portable speaker system that had been set up for the party's background music. "Since we're sharing information with the neighborhood," I said, my voice now amplified and carrying clearly across the park, "I thought you might be interested in some recordings I've made over the past few weeks." The first recording was Vanessa's voicemail from the day I'd confronted her at the restaurant, where she admitted to the affair and threatened to make me pay for exposing it. The second was the conversation with her cousin Mark, where he'd admitted they had no actual evidence of harassment. But the third recording was the real bombshell, a phone conversation between Trent and another woman recorded just 2 days ago, where he discussed his plan to milk the suburban princess for everything she's worth, before moving on to his next target. The crowd was dead silent as Trent's voice filled the park, describing Vanessa in crude terms and bragging about how easy it was to manipulate desperate housewives with more money than sense. Vanessa's face went white as she realized what she was hearing. Trent looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. "You left your phone in the gym's office yesterday," I replied. "The cleaning lady found it and called the number marked emergency contact, which happened to be mine, since I'm still listed as Vanessa's husband on her gym membership." It wasn't entirely true. Theo had actually hacked Trent's voicemail, but it was close enough to believable, and Trent was too panicked to think clearly. "You had no right. I had every right. You've been using my wife to commit fraud, selling steroids to gym members, and generally being a parasite on our community. I think people deserve to know what kind of man you really are." Trent lunged towards me, his face purple with rage, but I was ready for him. Years of weekend martial arts classes paid off as I sidestepped his charge and used his own momentum to send him tumbling into the dessert table. He came up covered in chocolate cake and potato salad, his designer polo shirt ruined, his carefully styled hair now decorated with whipped cream. The crowd gasped, and several people started taking pictures. "Stay down," I advised him calmly. "You're embarrassing yourself." But Trent wasn't finished. He scrambled to his feet and came at me again, this time with more control. He was bigger than me, stronger, and probably had more fighting experience. What he didn't have was an audience full of suburban parents who were already turning against him. As we grappled, I could hear people in the crowd shouting, not encouragement for the fight, but demands that someone call the police. Trent seemed to realize that he was making things worse for himself, but by then it was too late to back down. I managed to get him in a headlock and forced him down to his knees, using a technique I'd learned in college wrestling. He struggled for a moment, then went limp as he realized he was beaten. "Are we done?" I asked quietly. He nodded, gasping for breath. I released him and stepped back, straightening my shirt. Trent stayed on his knees for a moment, then slowly got to his feet. He looked around at the crowd of hostile faces, then at Vanessa, who was staring at him with a mixture of disgust and embarrassment. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over for weeks. You just didn't realize it yet." As if on cue, the sound of sirens filled the air. Someone had indeed called the police, and 2 squad cars were pulling up to the park. The officers who responded were the same ones who'd dealt with the house lockout incident weeks earlier, and they recognized both me and Vanessa immediately. "What's the situation here?" the senior officer asked, looking around at the crowd and the destroyed dessert table. "Domestic dispute that got out of hand," I explained. "Mr. Cross here assaulted me, and I defended myself." "That's not what happened," Trent protested. "He's been stalking us, harassing us." "Do you have any evidence of stalking or harassment?" the officer asked. Trent looked around desperately at Blair, Cassie, and Jules, but they were all staring at their phones, probably trying to figure out how to distance themselves from the situation. "We have recordings," Blair said weakly. "Of what?" "Of him talking to us." "Talking isn't harassment, ma'am." "Do you have evidence of threats, unwanted contact, or illegal behavior?" The silence stretched out as it became clear that they had nothing but accusations and hurt feelings. "What about the car vandalism?" Vanessa asked desperately. "Do you have evidence that Mr. Cole was responsible for that?" More silence. The officer turned to me. "Do you want to press charges for assault?" I looked at Trent, who was still covered in dessert and looking thoroughly defeated. "No, I think he's learned his lesson." "What about the rest of you? Anyone else want to file a complaint?" No one spoke up. The crowd was already dispersing, people gathering their children and their casserole dishes and heading home with enough gossip to fuel months of neighborhood drama. As the police cars drove away, I found myself standing alone in the park with Vanessa. Trent had disappeared, probably walking home, since his car was still decorated with the morning's revenge artwork. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For which part?" "All of it. The affair, the lies, tonight. You were right about him. I know. What happens now?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the way she was already planning her next move, figuring out how to spin this disaster to her advantage. "Now you figure out your own life," I said, without me. I walked away, leaving her standing alone in the park surrounded by the wreckage of her choices. As I reached my car, I could hear her calling my name, but I didn't look back. The next morning, I woke up in my temporary apartment and realized something had changed. For the first time in months, I felt free. The weight of betrayal and anger that had been pressing down on me was gone, replaced by something lighter, relief. I made coffee and sat on my small balcony, watching the sun rise over Dallas. My phone was full of text messages from neighbors, most of them supportive, a few apologetic for believing the rumors about me. There was one message from Jennifer Walsh. "Saw the video from last night, well done. Trent got what he deserved." And one from Theo. "Dude, you're all over social media. #Justice for Mason is trending locally. You're famous." But the most satisfying message came from an unexpected source. Richard Morrison, Vanessa's father. "Mason, I owe you an apology. You're a good man, and my daughter is a fool. If you ever need anything, call me." I deleted all the messages without responding and finished my coffee in peace. Later that day, I drove past my old house, our old house, and saw a moving truck in the driveway. Vanessa was loading boxes, probably moving back in with her parents while she figured out her next step. I didn't stop. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers were finalized. Vanessa got half the house's equity and half our savings, as required by Texas law. But she also got half the debt, including the credit card bills she'd run up buying gifts for Trent. Trent's gym closed permanently after losing most of its members and facing investigation by the state health department for steroid distribution. He left town quietly, probably to find new victims in another city. Vanessa's friends, Blair, Cassie, and Jules, found themselves social pariahs in the neighborhood after their role in the harassment campaign came to light. Two of them ended up getting divorced themselves when their own secrets came out in the aftermath. As for me, I bought a smaller house across town and started over. No more suburbia, no more HOA meetings, no more pretending to be someone I wasn't to fit in with people I didn't like. I kept the ashes from Vanessa's lingerie in a small urn on my mantle, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. Some things are better off burned, and some bridges are meant to stay collapsed. 6 months later, I ran into Jennifer Walsh at a coffee shop downtown. She looked happy, healthier than when I'd first met her in the aftermath of her own divorce. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Better," I said, and meant it. "Any regrets?" I thought about it for a moment, considering everything that had happened, the betrayal, the investigation, the public humiliation, the final confrontation. "Just one," I said finally. "What's that?" "I should have burned more than just the lingerie." She laughed, and I realized I was laughing too. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting free. And sometimes when the smoke clears and the ashes settle, you discover that what you thought was the end was actually just the beginning.